The thing you want most from them, closeness, can overwhelm them the fastest, and overwhelm often looks like distance, and this keynote hooks the viewer because it flips the meaning of what they're seeing. Most people are trained to interpret cold behavior as lack of interest. If someone is distant, they must not care. If someone is quiet, they must be losing feelings. If someone stops reaching out, they must be moving on. And in secure relationships, that assumption often holds true. But in avoidant dynamics, the opposite can also be true. Distance can show up precisely because feelings are rising, and the avoidance system doesn't know how to hold them. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the contradiction that traps people because it messes with your logic. Your heart says, they were so warm, they were so connected, it felt real. Then their behavior says, I don't want you. So your brain starts trying to solve the gap. You start replaying messages, you start analyzing every word, you start asking, what changed? And the fear inside you starts bargaining. Maybe if I say it differently, maybe if I give them space, maybe if I show more love, maybe if I act calmer, they'll come back. But what if nothing changed in the way you think? What if the closeness worked, it worked too well? What if your connection touched something deep inside them, and that depth triggered fear? That's what overwhelm is. Overwhelm is not always disgust or indifference. Overwhelm is the nervous system saying, this is too much emotional intensity for me to regulate. And for an avoidant, emotional intensity can be experienced as threat, even when the emotion is love. Because love for an avoidant often equals vulnerability, and vulnerability equals risk. Risk of being rejected, risk of being controlled, risk of being depended on, risk of failing you, risk of losing the identity of I don't need anyone. So the moment closeness begins to grow, the avoidant can feel a wave of emotion, and instead of leaning into it, they start trying to shut it down, because shutting it down is how they survive. They don't trust that emotional intensity will be safe. They don't trust they can handle what comes next. They don't trust that once they step into deeper connection, they will still have control over their life, their pace, their boundaries, their independence. This is why the viewer has to understand, closeness is not just closeness to an avoidant, closeness is responsibility. Closeness is expectation. Closeness is being seen. Closeness is being known. Closeness is being held accountable. Closeness is being needed. And if they grew up learning that being needed is pressure, or that love comes with conditions, then closeness doesn't feel like a gift. It feels like a demand waiting to happen. So what do they do when they feel overwhelmed? They create space. And the space is not always a message like, I need space. Sometimes it looks like emotional coldness, short replies, dry tone, delayed responses, busy excuses, less affection, less eye contact, less presence, more distraction, more logic, more detachment. And the person watching, the empath, the anxious, the deeply loving person, experiences it like abandonment. It hits the nervous system like rejection because you feel the warmth disappear. But here's the truth inside this keynote. Their distance may be a coping mechanism, not a verdict about your worth. Now, this does not mean you should romanticize coldness. It does not mean you should tolerate disrespect. But it does mean you should stop believing the lie that your love is the problem. Often your love is not the problem, their capacity is. Capacity means the ability to stay emotionally present when feelings rise, the ability to talk instead of vanish, the ability to repair instead of withdraw, the ability to tolerate intimacy without turning it into a threat. And when an avoidant lacks capacity, closeness triggers overwhelm. That overwhelm then produces distance. And that distance creates a second wave. Your anxiety says, fix it now. And if you chase from anxiety, you add pressure. Pressure adds intensity. Intensity increases overwhelm. Overwhelm increases distance. That's how the cycle forms. So the first keynote is not just a hook. It is a warning and a reframe. It warns the viewer, don't automatically interpret distance as indifference, but also don't interpret it as love. Interpret it as information. Your closeness is activating something inside them. Their nervous system is reacting. And the next question is not, how do I make them stop being overwhelmed? Because you can't regulate someone else's nervous system for them. The next question is, how do I protect myself while I observe whether they can grow? Because this is the difference between being wise and being trapped. A trapped person hears, they're overwhelmed because they care, and they wait, and they chase, and they excuse, and they keep giving more. A wise person hears, they're overwhelmed, and they say, okay, but can you still be respectful? Can you still communicate? Can you still show consistency? Because feelings without behavior are not safety. Feelings without accountability are not love in action. So this keynote keeps viewers watching because it exposes the hidden logic behind the avoidance coldness. It explains why the distance shows up right after intimacy, right after connection, right after a deep moment. It explains why your love can feel like pressure to them. and it gives the viewer relief because it removes the poison of self-blame. You are not too much for wanting closeness. You are not wrong for wanting consistency. You are not unreasonable for wanting warmth. Their overwhelm is not proof you are unlovable. It is proof that intimacy touches their fear. And once you understand that, you stop chasing the temperature of their mood. And you start choosing the only thing that truly heals: self-respect, calm boundaries, and a standard that says, I care, but I will not shrink my needs into silence just so you can stay comfortable. Avoidants don't lack feelings. Many of them lack capacity, and this keynote is powerful because it separates what they feel from what they can sustain. Most people assume that if someone has feelings, those feelings will naturally lead to closeness, communication, and commitment. That's how secure love works. But in avoidant dynamics, feelings can exist without follow-through. The heart can pull forward while the nervous system slams the brakes, so you end up with the most confusing experience in love: a person who seems to care, yet behaves like they can't hold you. Ladies and gentlemen, capacity is not love. Capacity is the ability to stay present with love. Capacity is emotional stamina. It's the ability to tolerate intimacy without panicking. It's the ability to communicate when things get uncomfortable. It's the ability to repair after conflict. It's the ability to be consistent even when emotions fluctuate. It's the ability to hold another person's feelings without feeling trapped or threatened. You can have feelings without capacity the way you can have a powerful engine without brakes. There is energy, there is force, there is attraction, but there is no stability. Love becomes unpredictable. This is why you'll often see avoidants feel intensely and still pull away. They can miss you, then ignore you. They can crave you, then withdraw. They can be affectionate, then cold. They can say they want you, then disappear right when you want clarity. Not because their feelings are fake, but because their system gets overwhelmed by what those feelings demand. Because feelings demand risk. If they feel deeply, they risk being seen. If they feel deeply, they risk having to show up. If they feel deeply, they risk losing control of the story. If they feel deeply, they risk needing you. And for someone who built their identity around independence, needing feels like weakness. So their system tries to reduce the risk by reducing the closeness. It's not always a conscious choice. It's often automatic. They don't wake up thinking, let me sabotage. They wake up feeling tension in their chest, a restless urge for space, and they call it, I'm busy. I'm not in the mood. I don't know what I want. When the real message is, my nervous system can't hold this intensity right now. So how do you recognize the difference between feelings and capacity? Feelings show up as bursts. They show up in moments. They show up in flashes of tenderness. They show up in jealousy. They show up when you pull away and they suddenly want you again. They show up when they fear losing you. Capacity shows up as consistency. Capacity shows up in the ordinary moments. It shows up when nothing dramatic is happening and they still choose you. It shows up when they are stressed and they still communicate respectfully. It shows up when you express a need and they don't punish you with silence. It shows up when conflict happens and they don't vanish, they repair. Capacity is not proven by how strongly they miss you, it's proven by how steadily they treat you. And this is the moment the viewer must stop confusing emotional spikes with emotional maturity. Many avoidants can give you a powerful emotional spike: intense chemistry, deep eye contact, sudden closeness, vulnerability that feels rare. And because it feels rare, you value it more. But rarity is not reliability. Intensity is not stability. And if you keep chasing the spikes, you will keep living in the crash. Now here's why avoidants often lack capacity. Their capacity was never trained. Many avoidants learn to survive by minimizing needs, suppressing emotions, and prioritizing self-reliance. They weren't taught how to talk through emotions. They weren't taught repair. They weren't taught how to ask for reassurance. They weren't taught how to tolerate conflict without shutting down. So when feelings rise, their system doesn't have the tools to regulate while staying connected. The only tool they have is distance. Distance is their medicine. Distance is how they calm down. Distance is how they feel safe. But the tragedy is what calms them hurts you. So you, the viewer, start compensating. You become the one who explains. You become the one who holds the relationship together. You become the one who doesn't bring up needs because you don't want to trigger withdrawal. You start walking on eggshells around their capacity limits. You start shrinking your truth to keep them close. And that is where your self-respect starts bleeding quietly. This keynote is here to stop that bleeding. Because if the issue is capacity, then the solution is not love harder. The solution is boundaries and standards. You can empathize with someone's limitations without letting those limitations define your life. You can care about their fear without volunteering to be the one who suffers for it. And here's the most important truth. Capacity can grow, but only if they choose to grow it. You cannot build capacity for someone else. You cannot love them into emotional stamina. You cannot text them into maturity. They have to face their fear, practice communication, tolerate discomfort, and learn to stay present. And if they won't do that, then the relationship will always be a cycle of feeling and fleeing. So the second keynote teaches the viewer to stop asking the wrong question. Don't ask, do they have feelings? Many avoidants do. Ask, do they have capacity? Ask, can they show up consistently? Ask, can they repair? Ask, can they hold intimacy without punishing me? Because feelings without capacity will keep you in confusion forever. And this is the moment the viewer regains power. When you understand capacity, you stop being hypnotized by emotional moments. You stop treating intensity as proof. You stop waiting for the next burst of warmth to confirm your worth. You start demanding stable love, the kind of love that doesn't overwhelm someone into disappearing. Because you deserve more than being loved in secret inside someone's feelings. You deserve to be loved safely, steadily, and out loud by someone who has the capacity to hold what they feel without making you pay the price. They get closer, then pull away, they open up, then disappear, they promise, then delay. And this keynote matters because it names the pattern that keeps people addicted to hope. Mixed signals are not random in avoidant psychology. Mixed signals are overwhelm in motion. It's the nervous system trying to touch closeness, then panicking, then retreating to safety. And the reason this keeps viewers hooked is because they've lived it. The moment you start believing, the moment you start relaxing, the moment you start thinking, finally, this is real, is often the exact moment the avoidant vanishes. Ladies and gentlemen, hope shows up right before they vanish because intimacy rises right before they vanish. Hope rises when they move closer, when they text more, when they show affection, when they talk about the future, when they act present, when they share something vulnerable, when they soften. That closeness activates your nervous system in a beautiful way. Your body finally exhales. Your heart finally trusts. Your mind finally stops scanning for danger. You start investing again. You become emotionally available again. And that emotional availability, that closeness, is exactly what triggers the avoidance alarm. For the avoidant, closeness creates a feeling of being in. Being means responsibility. It means expectations. It means being relied on. It means being seen. It means being accountable. It means they can't hide behind distance anymore. So right when they create hope in you, the avoidant begins feeling the pressure of what they just activated. They may not even call it pressure, they call it, I feel off. I'm busy. I don't know. I need space. I'm overwhelmed. But the truth is, their system is reacting to intimacy like it's danger. That's why the vanish often comes after a good moment, after a date that felt close, after a deep talk, after a vulnerable confession, after an intimate night, after you finally said how you feel, after you asked for clarity. It's not because you ruined it, it's because you moved the relationship into a zone that requires emotional capacity. And if their capacity is limited, they retreat. Now, the viewer needs to understand, this retreat is not always a calculated game. Sometimes it is automatic regulation. Their body becomes tense. Their chest feels tight. They start thinking, what now? They start imagining expectations. They start imagining conflict. They start imagining being trapped. And because they don't have the tools to regulate intimacy while staying connected, they use the one tool that has always worked, distance. Distance calms them, but distance destabilizes you. So you experience a painful whiplash. You go from closeness to silence with no explanation. That sudden drop triggers anxiety. It triggers abandonment fear. It triggers overthinking. And because your system wants to restore safety, you do what most people do. You chase the connection you just tasted. You reach out. You ask what's wrong. You try to fix it. You become warmer. You become more understanding. You become more available. You chase because your body is craving the return of what felt safe. But chasing becomes part of the cycle. Because when you chase, you increase intensity. Intensity increases pressure. Pressure triggers the avoidance alarm. And then the avoidant retreats more. So the pattern becomes self-sustaining closeness, panic distance, chase more panic, more distance. This keynote is here to expose the hidden cost of that pattern. It trains you to accept instability as normal. It trains you to work for basic consistency. It trains you to treat minimal effort as a miracle. You start celebrating the smallest things, a reply, a miss you, a check-in, because you've been starving. And when you're starving, crumbs feel like a feast. But the reason hope shows up before they vanish is also because avoidants often come close when they feel safe, and they feel safe when they are in control. They can be warm when the relationship is on their terms, when they decide the pace, when they decide the closeness, when they decide the timing. The moment you start relaxing and wanting more, the balance of control shifts. You become more secure in the bond. You start expecting consistency. You start holding standards, and that shift can trigger their fear because fear hates losing control. So they pull away to regain it. And here's the hard truth: the vanish is often a control reset. It reestablishes distance. It puts you back in uncertainty. It returns you to chasing. And if you fall into it, you give them the power position again. This is why the viewer must learn one critical skill: don't confuse closeness with commitment. An avoidant can create closeness in moments, then disappear when closeness requires responsibility. The relationship is not proven by warm moments, it is proven by what happens after warm moments. Do they stay present? Do they follow through? Do they communicate? Do they repair? Do they remain consistent? Or do they retreat and leave you carrying the emotional cost alone? So what do you do when hope shows up? You enjoy it, but you don't abandon your standards. You stay grounded. You pace yourself. You watch the follow-through. You don't give full emotional access until you see stability. You don't treat one good week as proof the pattern is gone. You don't hand over your trust to a moment. You let time and consistency earn it. Because this keynote is not trying to make the viewer cold. It's trying to make the viewer wise. It's teaching them that if hope always shows up right before vanishing, then the real issue is not whether the avoidant can feel. The issue is whether they can stay. And if they cannot stay, your love will keep becoming a roller coaster. And a roller coaster is not romance, it's nervous system addiction. The moment you see the pattern as overwhelm in motion, you stop chasing hope, and you start choosing stability. Their mind replays you non-stop, then the defense voice says, don't text, don't commit, don't get trapped. And this keynote keeps people watching because it finally exposes what you never get to hear. The private conversation happening inside the avoidant. The viewer has only ever seen the outside, the silence, the cold tone, the delayed replies, the distance. And silence makes your imagination cruel. Silence makes you assume the worst. They don't care. They found someone else. I'm not important. But the hidden truth is, many avoidants are not calm in their silence. They are conflicted. They are busy in their head. They are replaying you while resisting you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the inner war. The avoidant's heart feels something, but the avoidant's defense system panics about what that feeling means. So the mind starts running two tracks at once. Track one is attachment. I miss them. That was real. I should reach out. I don't want to lose them. Track two is protection. Don't get soft. Don't give them power. Don't look needy. If you text, you'll be pulled in. If you commit, you'll regret it. And when those tracks collide, the avoidant often chooses the track that feels safest in the moment: protection. That's why the avoidant can think about you all day and still not send one honest sentence, because honest sentences create emotional consequence. Honest sentences invite deeper conversation. Honest sentences require responsibility, and responsibility is what the avoidant fears when they are overwhelmed. So instead of reaching out with truth, they reach for control. They don't send, I miss you and I'm scared. They send nothing. Or they send something small, casual, surface level, a breadcrumb that gives them connection without vulnerability. Or they stare at the typing bubble in their mind and then close the phone because the defense voice screams, if you text, you'll lose your power. Now here's the part that makes this keynote so powerful. The defense voice is not always logical. It's protective. It's built from old pain. It's built from earlier experiences where emotional openness led to embarrassment, rejection, criticism, or feeling trapped. So the defense voice doesn't care if you're kind. It doesn't care if you're safe. It only cares about preventing the feeling of exposure. It's like a guard dog that barks even when the visitor is friendly, because it's trained to treat closeness as threat. So what are they telling themselves when they ignore you? Often it sounds like this: if I respond, it will turn into a long conversation. If I respond, they'll want clarity. If I respond, I'll have to explain myself. If I respond, they'll expect consistency. If I respond, I might get pulled back into emotions I can't manage. If I respond, I might lose control. And because control feels like safety, they choose silence. And the tragedy is, silence protects them and punishes you. The viewer feels small. The viewer feels unworthy. But inside the avoidant, the silence is often not, I don't care. It can be, I care and I don't know how to handle it. It can be, I care and I'm terrified of what happens if I admit it. It can be, I care and I'm scared you'll need something I can't consistently give. It can be, I care and I'm afraid I'll fail. This is also why avoidants sometimes act cold after intimacy. After a close moment, their mind starts racing. Was that too much? Did I give too much? Are they going to expect more now? Do they think we're serious? Am I stuck? The defense voice interprets intimacy as a contract, and contracts feel like traps to someone who survives by keeping escape routes. So the avoidant withdraws to re-establish independence, to prove to themselves they still have control, to calm the fear that closeness activated. Now here's the crucial point for the viewer. Understanding this inner war should not make you chase harder. It should make you stop personalizing. Because whether their silence is indifference or overwhelm, the impact on you is the same if it continues. You lose peace, you lose stability. You lose your self-respect trying to earn basic emotional presence. So the purpose of this keynote is not to give the avoidant a pass. It's to give you clarity. It's to help you stop thinking you can fix this with more love. You can't love someone out of their defense system. They have to choose to face it. They have to choose to be brave. They have to choose to communicate even when they feel fear. They have to choose to risk vulnerability if they want real intimacy. Because here's the harsh truth many avoidants use: don't get trapped. As an excuse to keep you trapped, they keep you in uncertainty. They keep you waiting. They keep you attached while they stay protected. And if you don't recognize the defense voice pattern, you'll keep interpreting breadcrumbs as progress and silence as temporary. You'll keep living in a relationship with their potential, not their behavior. So this keynote ends in a powerful lesson for the viewer. You don't need to hate them to stop chasing them. You don't need to demonize them to choose yourself. You can understand the inner war and still require adult behavior. You can have empathy and still have standards. Because a person who is ready will text even if they're scared. A person who is growing will speak even if they feel exposed. A person who truly wants you will risk the discomfort of honesty rather than punish you with silence. So yes, their mind may replay you non-stop, and their defense voice may scream at them to stay distant. But the only question that matters is whether they can override that voice with maturity. If they can't, then your love will keep being held hostage by their fear, and you deserve a relationship where your heart is not punished for wanting closeness. Overwhelm isn't cured by your chasing. Pressure amplifies fear, and fear creates distance, and this keynote is where the viewer finally understands why trying harder keeps backfiring. Because when you care about someone, your instinct is to close the gap. If they pull away, you lean in. If they go quiet, you speak more. If they get cold, you become warmer. That instinct is loving in a healthy relationship. But in an avoidant dynamic, that same instinct becomes gasoline on a fire, not because your love is wrong, but because their nervous system is already overloaded. Ladies and gentlemen, to an overwhelmed avoidant, pressure is not romance, it's threat. Pressure is not devotion, it's demand. Pressure is not closeness, it's being cornered. And what creates pressure isn't just what you say, it's the emotional energy behind it. It's the urgency, it's the "we need to talk." It's the multiple messages. It's the need for reassurance right now. It's the long paragraphs explaining your feelings. Even if you are gentle, the avoidant's nervous system can interpret that as, "I'm being pulled into intensity." So what happens when you chase? You increase emotional intensity. The relationship suddenly feels heavier. The avoidant starts imagining expectations. They start imagining responsibility. They start imagining a difficult conversation. They start imagining they'll have to show up consistently. And because they don't trust themselves to hold that, fear rises. Fear then triggers their oldest coping mechanism, distance. They delay. They ignore. They get busy. They shut down. They go cold. They disappear. And you, in response, feel even more anxious because the distance increased. So you chase again. And now the loop becomes a machine. This is why so many people feel like they're losing themselves with avoidance. Your nervous system becomes reactive. You stop acting from calm desire and start acting from panic. You're not texting because you want to share life. You're texting because you want to stop the pain of uncertainty. You're not asking for clarity because you're controlling. You're asking because your body wants safety. But to an avoidant, your need for safety becomes the very thing that threatens their safety, because their safety is built on not having to manage someone else's emotions. So the avoidant experiences your chase as emotional obligation. And emotional obligation is what they fear. That's why pressure amplifies fear. It forces the avoidant to feel the weight of the bond. It makes them confront closeness before they are ready. It turns the relationship from something they can touch and retreat from into something that feels like it's pulling them in. And if they're overwhelmed already, being pulled in feels unbearable. So distance becomes relief. Now here is the part the viewer must understand for their own dignity. Your chasing doesn't just increase their fear, it reduces your value in the dynamic. Not because you are less valuable, but because chasing signals availability without standards. It signals that your boundaries are flexible. It signals that they can withdraw and still keep you. It teaches them, I can go cold and they will work harder. And a nervous system learns from repetition. If withdrawal produces pursuit, the avoidance nervous system will keep using withdrawal. It's not calculated cruelty, It's conditioning. This is also why avoidants often return when you stop chasing. When you stop texting, stop explaining, stop trying to fix it, the pressure drops. Their fear calms, their defenses soften, and suddenly their attachment feelings rise again. They feel you again. They miss you again. They think about you again. But notice what happened. They didn't become mature. The environment became less intense, so their system could breathe. That's why chasing creates distance and detachment creates curiosity. But here's the warning. Detachment is not the same as games. You are not pulling away to manipulate them. You're pulling away to protect yourself and to stop feeding the fear loop. You're choosing calm so the relationship can reveal its truth. Because a relationship that only works when you're silent and small is not a healthy relationship. It's a relationship that depends on you suppressing your needs. So what should the viewer do instead of chasing? Replace pursuit with structure. Structure is calm boundaries. Structure is pacing. Structure is not giving full emotional access to someone who is inconsistent. Structure is saying, I'm open to connection, but I need consistency. Structure is allowing space without punishing, but also not reassuring someone who is choosing distance. Structure is refusing to chase someone into communication. And here's the key reason structure works. Structure removes urgency. It lowers intensity. It gives the avoidant a chance to approach without panic, but it also introduces consequence. They don't get unlimited access while staying cold. They must rise to meet the standard. And if they can't, you learn what you need to know. This person may have feelings, but they don't have capacity. This keynote ultimately saves the viewer from the deepest trap, believing that love is proven by suffering. No, love is proven by mutual effort and safety. If your effort creates more distance, that is not a sign you should try harder. It is a sign the system is broken. So stop feeding pressure to someone whose nervous system uses pressure as a reason to disappear. Because the most loving thing you can do in an avoidant dynamic is not to chase, it's to stay grounded, protect your peace, and allow the relationship to either rise into maturity or collapse into the truth, without you sacrificing yourself to keep it alive. The real question isn't whether their feelings are intense. The real question is whether they are growing, because feelings can be loud inside someone who is still emotionally unavailable. This is where people get trapped. They start collecting signs. Like evidence, they watched my story, they got jealous, they reached out at midnight, they liked an old photo, they asked a random question, they went cold right after being sweet. And the mind turns those signs into hope, because hope is less painful than acceptance. But none of those signs guarantee maturity. None of those signs guarantee safety. None of those signs guarantee that the same cycle won't repeat the moment you open your heart again. An avoidant can think about you nonstop and still be incapable of loving you in a way that protects your nervous system. They can miss you and still punish you with silence. They can crave you and still avoid accountability. They can feel overwhelmed and still choose distance every time intimacy rises. That's why you cannot build your life around what someone might feel in private. You can only build a relationship around what someone chooses in public, in behavior, in consistency, in repair. This keynote matters because it pulls you out of the most dangerous fantasy, that being in their head means you are being chosen. Being in their head can mean many things. It can mean genuine attachment. It can mean regret. It can mean fear of losing control. It can mean ego bruising. It can mean loneliness. It can mean they miss the comfort you provided while still resisting the responsibility you require. And if you treat internal obsession as proof of love, you will keep accepting a relationship where you are emotionally fed in crumbs and starved in reality. So you have to start measuring the right things. Growth looks like them becoming clearer, not vaguer. Growth looks like them communicating earlier, not disappearing and returning later. Growth looks like them owning impact, not defending intent. Growth looks like them repairing, not resetting. Growth looks like them respecting boundaries without punishing you. Growth looks like them showing up when it's uncomfortable, not only when it's convenient. Because anyone can be warm when they miss you. The question is whether they can stay warm when you need something real. This is where your self-respect becomes the most attractive and the most protective part of you. Self-respect stops you from turning their coldness into a challenge. Self-respect stops you from chasing mixed signals as if they're a treasure map. Self-respect stops you from auditioning for basic consistency. It teaches you to respond to patterns, not promises. It teaches you to pause, breathe, and ask, is this connection making me stable or making me anxious? Because love that consistently makes you anxious is not love that is safe, no matter how intense the chemistry feels. And here is the boundary that changes everything. You stop giving full emotional access to partial effort. You stop giving your heart to someone who only shows up when they feel like it. You stop letting late, night crumbs by morning, level commitment. You stop rewarding disappearance with warmth the second they return. Not because you are bitter, but because your nervous system deserves protection. Your love deserves a container. Your time deserves honesty. This keynote is also a warning against becoming addicted to potential. Potential is the most expensive drug in the world because it costs you your present. You keep waiting for the version of them that shows up for 2 days, and you keep excusing the version of them that disappears for 2 weeks. You keep calling the inconsistency fear, and you keep calling your pain patience. But patience without standards is self-abandonment. Empathy without boundaries becomes permission. So the strongest move is not to punish them, and it's not to beg them. The strongest move is to hold your standard calmly and let the truth surface. If they reach out, you don't attack, but you also don't collapse into relief. You respond with calm clarity. You let them know connection is possible, but confusion is not. You don't demand perfection, you demand effort. You don't demand intensity, you demand consistency. You don't demand endless texting, you demand basic respect and honest communication. Because the goal is not to win, an avoidant. The goal is to stop losing yourself. And when you choose growth as the standard, something beautiful happens. You stop obsessing over what their coldness means, and you start noticing what your body is telling you. Your body tells you when something is unsafe. Your body tells you when you're walking on eggshells. Your body tells you when you're overfunctioning. Your body tells you when you're shrinking. And once you listen, you realize the truth. You have been trying to prove you are lovable to someone who is not yet capable of receiving love without fear. So yes, it's possible they're thinking about you nonstop. It's possible you haunt them. It's possible they feel overwhelmed. But the only thing that changes your life is whether they choose to grow into someone who can communicate, repair, and stay present. Until then, you don't keep volunteering to be someone's emotional comfort while you're treated like a problem when you have needs. You don't keep becoming smaller so they can stay comfortable. You don't keep paying for their fear with your peace.